Kansas leaving the Big 12 for the SEC is not only on the table, but numbers from the United States government are now backing it up. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Let's do a jam-packed Monday. Kansas leaving the Big 12 for the SEC is possible. Also, Washington State and Oregon State to the Big 12, whether you like it or not, is now being pushed by an ESPN reporter, and West Virginia needs some help on the gridiron. First, Kansas leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. By the way, thanks for making this show your first listen every single day. Is it on the table, and where does this come from? The report originally is from Greg Pflugar, the same journalist that 2 years ago was pushing down everyone's throat that USC would leave the Pac-12 to the Big 10. He was the very first one on that case. He was also the guy who talked about Colorado's conversations with the Big 12 to reunite with the conference. Back then, what a lot of us said was USC and Rutgers, a conference game, Colorado playing in the Big 12 again, coming back to the conference they left a decade plus ago. There's no way it's going to happen, and he was spot on. This comes from someone who has sources. Greg Pflugar knows his stuff in college football. Now, does he know enough to say that Kansas will officially leave the Big 12 for the SEC? No, and he didn't say that. The report isn't that this is going to happen, but if you dig deeper, it's that not only can it happen, but the likelihood is not as far off as you might expect. Let's start. Regional rivalry. Missouri, I think the people who have gone crazy over this the most are less so Big 12 people and more Missouri fans. They think this is the worst thing possible, that Kansas could never get in. Looking back, if you give the SEC a chance to add Missouri or Kansas, who would they go with? I know Mizzou has not been completely awful in football, but the Kansas basketball power and where the SEC wants to go under Greg Sankey in basketball is one that certainly could have used Kansas when Missouri did not win a conference game this year. And now that Kansas football is not just relevant, but also mightily profitable and building a new stadium, massive stadium upgrade, there is more of an allure there. So the first thing you get is this regional rivalry. The second thing you get is the United States government telling me that Kansas to the SEC is not impossible. This is per the EADA. These numbers, literally the website is .gov. The U.S. government is reporting that from 2003 to 2022, and might I remind you, Kansas was good at football for maybe 2 of the years in that span, maybe went to 4 bowl games over the course of that 2 decades. Jeff Fuller does reporting here from the EADA. The Jayhawks brought in $1.9 billion during that span. That is just behind schools like Nebraska, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Arkansas. Kansas ranking 23rd in the country in that span. This is one of the top 25 most profitable athletic departments in the nation, and the SEC sees that. It also sees the opportunity to expand footprint and establish more room in Kansas City, get closer to Omaha, Nebraska, which has become a haven for them every June when baseball teams trek to Omaha, and to bring in not just a Kansas, slowly Kansas they can trounce in football, but Kansas that makes money in football. Kansas that's projected in the top 3 in the Big 12 in football, has one of the best quarterbacks in the country, one of the best running backs in the conference, and could at least, look, at this point, if I'm the SEC and I see, top 3 basketball brand in the country, no matter what. They're always going to be good, profitable, at the top of a game in basketball, and football might go 6-6. I'll take 6-6 over Vanderbilt's 3-9. I am not shocked there would be mutual interest there. I should note as well, Kansas in these EADA standings as far as revenue goes, the last 2 decades, so a pretty good sample size, they're ahead of Washington, Michigan State, UCLA, Virginia, Clemson. They are 10 spots ahead of Clemson, North Carolina, and Oregon, and far ahead of Miami. That's a pretty good place to be as you see the rest of college football falling apart. And you might think, that's weird. I didn't know those things about Kansas. I didn't think they'd be that valuable. Expansion works a little bit differently. We've been touting Virginia. Like if the Big 12 added Virginia tomorrow, the casual viewer would say, that sucks. They're terrible at basketball now, and they're not that good at football ever. Why would you add them? it's about getting new markets, having a new footprint, and taking these brands, bringing an evaluation of a brand, saying this is what this school's name is worth, and adding that to your conference. For the SEC, Kansas gives you something that Greg Sankey finds value in. And for Kansas, here's the outward look. I mean, okay. Can you and I have a conversation here for a second? Can we lean in for a second here? You are the athletic director at Kansas, or the president, or the athletic director at Texas Tech, and the SEC calls you and gives you an invite. I like the Big 12 as much as the next guy. I host the podcast that pays my bills about the Big 12, but I am probably going to answer the call to the SEC. So let's be very clear there that if this is something that comes to fruition in the next couple of years, I'm sure Kansas is going to be on board. This kind of goes back to a point that multiple reporters have made on this show, that in expansion, we are going toward a hodgepodge, almost like a Pangea, where it's just, hey, load up, dude. Just load up. If a school is valuable, go for it. And I thought like Kansas to the Big Ten was the one that everybody was mentioning 2 years ago. You'll remember the Big 12 almost died. And in the process of us almost dying, everyone thought, oh, okay, can Oklahoma State get to the SEC? Can Kansas go to the Big Ten? Everybody's kind of picking their next landing spots, TCU to the Pac-12. So it's almost shocking the SEC would be there in the conversation. But then again, if you look at those numbers, you say, oh, shoot. Yep, could see that. And if expansion is becoming this big hodgepodge, then I could see why of the Big 12 teams you could take off the board, Kansas is probably up there. I don't know if I would have had them as high on my list until these EADA numbers were put together by Jeff Fuller and until we really understood how valuable this school was, specifically on the basketball side. Some universities make enough money in basketball that you go, nope, we could probably use that. Though football pushes the needle, there are about 5 universities out there where you say basketball is profitable enough that you will never die. And Kansas is one of those. You see somebody in Spokane, Washington in a Kansas shirt. You say, hey, go Jayhawks. And they say, what? You say, go Jayhawks. It's your shirt. They say, oh, I just bought this shirt at Walmart. Thought it looked nice. Yeah, I guess. Whatever. It's a t-shirt school. Not a bad place to be in an expansion. Coming up, Washington State, Oregon State, also in a okay spot in expansion. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Look, I hire an intern every single year. Twice, to be exact. But how do I do it? Because I don't really I'm just not going to put on Twitter, hey, who wants to be my intern? That's kind of weird. I go to LinkedIn Talent Solutions because it's easy to find a candidate for your job. It's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. When I got my job with the bananas and the party animals, I wasn't looking for a job. I saw it. LinkedIn Talent Solutions. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. They know that small businesses are wearing so many hats, so they want to help you make the hiring process easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Keep in mind that terms and conditions, they do apply. ESPN's Bill Connolly is on board with Oregon State and Washington State making the trek to the Big 12. This is a conversation we had a lot of the show last week. If you're an everydayer and somebody that consistently watches this content, you know exactly why I think that those two schools can add something to this conference. I've seen so many people. Heartland College Sports was the first one to actually tweet this out. And I've seen so many people comment on that article since it was released saying, hey, wait a second, adding those two just wouldn't be that profitable. And they don't like the idea of Washington State and Oregon State in the conference. But as Connolly mentions, what the Big 12 is going to need to do moving forward is expand to 32 teams. That's a wild thought, but I think we can actually piece together why it's not that crazy and might actually help a whole lot. So here's this Heartland College Sports article. I like Heartland College Sports. I don't agree with everything they do or say, but I like them. I don't think we always have to agree to have a mutual respect across college football. Connolly tells 1080 The Fan, I do think the Big 12 is kind of a wild card from the perspective of they seem to be willing to create a 32-team conference if the dynamics are right. That's crazy. Let's unpack that right there. Washington State, Oregon State. I think they can get in with the Big 12 not expanding to 32 teams. But one of the reasons that Connolly wants to do this, and before you just read the headline and say, oh, Washington State, Oregon State to the Big 12, and then you see that Connolly says, yes, in a 32-team format, which is 16 teams away. There are a lot of teams that would have to come to the conference in that event. The reason I think those two could be in before that is because of valuations in TV numbers. Washington State gets a lot. They draw a lot of viewership from the Seattle market. Oregon State has Corvallis, which feels like a fun little college town. The following's there for both schools to be a power. They've been in power conferences. They've won recently in football. Those are two things that are going to help you. Will they draw a lot of viewership? No, but maybe more than anything, that whole thing I said 6 months ago about how we're not an orphanage, we are a conference, I've started to kind of come off of that a little bit, because guess what? It sucks when you're looking around the room and you go, hey, wait a second, we were also in a power conference. Why do we get left behind? And I do believe the altruistic effort to help those two schools is something that would benefit both parties in the end. That's a spiel for another show and another day. Connolly said it's going to take 32 teams in the Big 12, but he also mentions to, again, 1080 The Fan, that the dynamics need to be right. What? I would love to prod. I wish that I was in this radio show, could have asked ESPN's Bill Connolly, why do you think the Big 12 is going to go to 30? Why do you think they seem like the team that the conference is going to do that? We're the ones that turned down UConn and Gonzaga recently. Like, we wanted to expand to 32. We probably would have done that already. Connolly continues, they're willing to take a big swing, and they've already taken one. Yeah, but I think they could have. I'm sorry, now I'm just picking them apart. I think they could have swung and got Washington State and Oregon State when they took the big swing earlier, and they just didn't want them. So I'm not sure why they want them. I guess they're okay. I can't tell what the timeline like this would be. Obviously, the next step is the revenue sharing aspect and what groups form. That's probably the next step. I don't see the Big 12 doing anything before that. And bingo, bango, bongo. There's where Bill Connolly lands the plane, baby. This idea, any idea, let's say you want USF to the Big 12, SMU, say you're a freak and you want SMU to the Big 12. That idea is so contingent upon whether or not schools are going to have to pay their student athletes $22 million a year. If these new revenue sharing numbers come out and they say, look, NCAA says, look, you can compete at the highest level of college football by giving your players $22 million, a cut directly from the university, and they become employees of your university. In that event, the schools that cannot afford to do that, they kind of fugazi, they go away. We can't continue to operate as, in my opinion, I don't think the conference can continue to operate where you say, hey, 10 of our teams can afford to be legit and elite in college athletics. 6 of them cannot. We can't have just 6 punching bags. And then those 6 punching bags, when they play each other, get 0 viewership because they have 2-star players that just want to go be employees of a university and they can't really get near as much money at a different school. So they've settled for something less. Instead, there will be attrition in these leagues. There will be Mississippi State, you can't pay that? I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to be able to play here. Oh, Iowa State. Gosh, as much as I love Ames and Iowa State being a Big 12 school, you got to look at the revenue numbers and say, shoot, can they afford $22 million a year? And if they cannot, is that the demise of Iowa State in the Big 12? That is a question that until we figure that out, it's tough to say, hey, Oregon State, we want you. And the day they get here, they go, ooh, we can't afford that $22 million, by the way. And you say, oh, sweet, we don't want you anymore. Goodbye. Bye. I feel confident with every number that I have seen over the last year that Washington State could foot that bill at $22 million a year. Again, there are some Big 12 schools. Cincinnati, sorry. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. There are Big 12 schools that cannot. They cannot pay that price tag. Washington State, yes. Oregon State, hard maybe. I don't even know if those guys can pull that down because the number is so steep and they're trying to create the elite sector of college football. So with that, what Connolly's mentioning is 32 teams. I find it so odd that he talks about how the revenue sharing is something that we have to all kind of sift through before we decide to expand further, but also add 32 teams. I mean, what is your 32 team wish list here? What are your other 16? I mean, Boston College? I want USF, certainly USF before I want Boston College, and that's not really a good thing. Connolly continues, again, from Heartland College Sports on 1080 The Fan. When there's a big breakdown, and suddenly only the teams that can pay $15 million a year, he's a couple million off, to their football players end up on this other level, we'll see. My main recommendation is just to be good at football, and that'll solve a few of the problems. He's hit the nail on the head again. So he's hit the nail on a couple of things here. One, hey, wait a second, slow your roll. You got to be able to pay a whole lot of money to get in this conference because you got to pay a whole lot of money to your student athletes. The other thing he's hit on the head here is be good at football. we've learned one thing through all of this. If you are just good at football, we can probably get your foot in the door for or if you're Colorado, we can probably get your foot in, or Arizona State, foot in the door to the Big 12. I do see a kind of the hodgepodge deal, the Pangea of college football, and how there will be a 24-team Big 12 because it's just going to be add, try to get as big as you can. I mean, imagine tomorrow if the Big 12 had 32 teams, you earn some sort of respect from that. People are like, oh, yeah, well, I got a lot of teams, and ESPN's going to give you more money. Now, per school, it would not be very good, but I could see that being a flashy move from Brett Yormark. I just would like to know who. And in Washington State, Oregon State, if it's 32, they are definitely in. You made the cut. Coming up, West Virginia is good at football, except for they got screwed. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do you like traditional Monopoly? I sure do. I play it fairly often when we're on the road with the Savannah Bananas, and we play as a team. But then when we're on the road, I can't really play Monopoly, so I have to play Monopoly Go, which rocks. Fun game. I can beat my friends. I actually am atop the leaderboard right now. You can beat me, except for you can't because I'm better than you. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards, or you can work against them and heist their vaults. The more you win together, though, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasures or a pachinko machine. There's always something new with rent frenzies and multipliers. Go discover more fun in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench. Download Google Play or the App Store. Monopoly Go. Game on. West Virginia's got a legitimate problem. They got screwed. Here's a question and answer that I did with Locked On College Football to give you more.
West Virginia head coach Neil Brown was, by all accounts, on the hot seat last year, and there aren't a lot better ways. There are better ways to say than what I just said. But anyway, there aren't many better ways to quiet down the hot seat talk than a good old 9-4 season for the Mountaineers. Was that a blip on the radar to you, or is this sustainable?
Gosh dang it, Neil Brown. I think the funniest sentence in the world on May 10th or whatever it is West Virginia football coach Neil Brown. Because a year ago, it was like, oh, poor guy. There was like the hot seat, and then this seat just disintegrated a long time ago and no longer exists anymore. So Neil Brown's just kind of hanging out for a bit before he gets fired. And then the guy stumbles upon 9 wins. And now the question is it sustainable for a guy who returns? There's just bugs everywhere. Welcome to Arkansas. He returns Garrett Green as quarterback and a backfield loaded with Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. Like, those are names in college football. You're like, oh, yeah, I've heard of those guys. And in the Big 12, I think that's going to get you in a pretty good direction. Should West Virginia be just as good this 2024 season? I think so. It's just a matter of a schedule that's not too kind.
It is not kind. Now, I have a rule. We'll get to the schedule in a moment, but I have a rule here at Locked On College Football, Drake, and that's that I am inclined to like you as a team if you are returning some combination of quarterback, coach, and offensive coordinator. If you give me all three, I tend to like you. Now, Clemson might be the exception because they haven't added a single transfer portal player this offseason. I don't know if I love that when 13 guys have left. They weren't all going to be starters, of course, but we'll see if Clemson. But again, I can't dislike them because you just don't see that level of continuity in college football. Ole Miss is a team I've liked for a long time. Why? Because you got Lane Kiffin, who's the play caller and the head coach. You got Jackson Dart back. Georgia should be the preseason #1 team. You got Kirby Smart. You got Carson Beck. Texas will be very good. I could keep going. So when I see that quarterback coach returning, I lean towards, hey, this should work out. How good is Garrett Green in a Big 12 quarterback class that, frankly, is as strong as it has been in the last few years?
Oh, man, I love the idea that Neil Brown and Garrett Green are coming back together. And it feels like West Virginia has used that chip on their shoulder. That was such a funny quote last year at Big 12 Media Days. As his team was picked 14th in the conference, last place, Neil Brown said, "I promise you this." And everybody's kind of on their toes, ready for the big quote. He goes, "We won't finish last." It's like, oh, what a stupid thing to say. But then they take that 14 mantra and use it to win those 9 games, Garrett Green being at the forefront of that. He was an electric quarterback, could get it down with his legs too, and bringing him back in the offense with a couple of running backs behind him that are as good as they come in the Big 12. I am confident that continuity puts West Virginia in a good place. That said, look at Kyle Whittingham and Cam Rising. Look at Daniels and Leipold. Look at even an Avery Johnson who started a good portion under Chris Kleiman, or Alan Bowman and Mike Gundy, or Rocco Becht and Matt Campbell. There are so many of these in the Big 12 this year. There's so much continuity at the quarterback position that how do you now separate West Virginia from the rest of the league? That's the part that's tough to do.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think there's a ton of separation. You look at Colorado even. You got Deion Sanders, you got Shedeur Sanders, and you certainly have, Shedeur might be the best overall quarterback, at least from an NFL standpoint, in the Big 12. But you go up and down, and, before we hopped on to record, we were going up and down the quarterback list in the Big 12, and you go, wait a minute. But before you know it, you're like 8 quarterbacks deep of guys who you expect to be above average. And I think it's going to contribute to the Big 12 being a wildly competitive and fun league. And West Virginia last year, 8-4 in the regular season, won their bowl game. Neil Brown gets doused in mayonnaise because, college football. Why the heck not? I look at West Virginia's schedule this year, Drake, and if you go to our friends at FanDuel and examine their win total, you see it's 6.5. You're like, well, that's kind of low for a team that had a nice year. Then you look at their schedule and you go, wow, 6.5. That might be generous here. Now, I'm not down on the Mountaineers. They have not had some crushing off season where they're bringing in high profile transfers and making all sorts of big moves. It's been fine. It's been solid, but this schedule, Drake, for those who are unaware, West Virginia opens in Morgantown against Penn State. I'm sorry, West Virginia fans, you're going to lose that football game. Penn State's a better team. They've got the backyard brawl on September 14th that is on the road. Yep. And then, do you think I've said the hard part of the schedule? I got news for you. I haven't. I have not, because Big 12 play begins like this.
Oh, God.
Kansas at home, bye. At Oklahoma State, host Iowa State, host Kansas State, at Arizona. I don't know if you could concoct, without Utah in the mix, a more difficult 5-game stretch there. Can the Mountaineers navigate their way through it? And if they win 3 of those games, they might win the national championship.
Here's the problem, Spencer. If I told you that, and bear with me a bit, Kansas is going to a bowl game. Yeah. Oklahoma State, that's actually what they do. Iowa State's gotten into a groove. Kansas State might win the Big 12. Arizona has Noah Fafita at quarterback. The only reprieve you get is Cincinnati and Baylor, and then you go right to UCF and Texas Tech, who also should be bowl teams. When you're looking at a Penn State and even Pitt, that's 10. We could deduce 9 to 10 teams from this schedule to go to a bowl game. That's not easy, especially with the spattering of those being on the road. For Neil Brown, they want that. They want the blue collar, coal miner attitude. They went out there and they did what was impossible, and you all doubted us. But at some point, it gets impractical. This is an impractical schedule, namely with those 5 consecutive games in conference play where you go, oh, none of them look good. I think Kansas could beat Arlington. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Arizona probably also make those case. You get those in 4 out of 5 weeks. I don't like that.
No, I don't like it either. And let's not sleep on going to Lubbock on November 30th to wrap up the regular season. Like
maybe fighting for a bowl game there.
I completely agree. And I don't think Texas Tech is going to be in wounded animal mode, barring a slew of injuries like they had last year at the quarterback position in particular. And I expect Texas Tech, who's got a win total of 8.5, to be in that 8-9 win range this year for Coach McGuire there. I don't know how much tougher of a schedule you could draw up. And then because they have the backyard brawl rivalry, which I love, they're also tossing in the Penn State game. And for anyone out there who is a college football fan that says, well, Saban and teams, they manipulate their schedules. This is why, because do you think West Virginia can beat Penn State? Look, I've seen crazier things happen in college football. I once watched Appalachian State beat Michigan. I watched Boise State beat Oklahoma. Like, I've seen crazier upsets, but Penn State's a better football team.
Yeah. Well, and asking, again, I think you take that as it's the micro, the macro of then asking you to not only beat Penn State or compete in that game and then kind of go week in and week out of just tough games. Like, oh, shoot, like you couldn't get over the hump in that one. And now I'm going to ask you to kind of do the same thing with a really gauntlet of a Big 12 schedule. And conversely, let's look at Utah's schedule. I love bringing this up because West Virginia's been here for a decade plus. Utah walks in the conference. Here's a 5-game stretch they get. Arizona State, TCU, who God knows what that'll look like.
I kind of like TCU. I don't hate TCU's offseason. I like the Andy Avalos hire.
Houston, BYU.
Not great.
Colorado.
They're okay.
That's your 5-game. Like Utah looks at that and goes, oh, hell yeah. Welcome to the Big 12, baby. Whereas West Virginia is duking it out with Noah Fafita, Jalen Daniels, and Avery Johnson in consecutive weeks.
Yeah, I think that is a stark contrast there. And Utah's got to look at that 5-game stretch. And, they probably see it the same way I viewed the pizza we brought home for dinner earlier. And I was incredibly hungry. Let me tell you, the pizza did not have a chance. 3 slices were gone in about 150 seconds. It was just completely one-sided, utter annihilation. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. Fantastic, as always. Thank you, Drake.
Yes, West Virginia, I think you're a good football team. Your schedule just kind of sucks. That was myself and Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football. Thanks for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Good show today, huh? I had fun with you guys. I love you guys. Real love, L-O-V-E, Nakam. That's sorry in Hebrew. What? This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose grande.